What's up, you guys? Good morning and welcome to another episode of Roll Call, TTSH Nursing's very own podcast brought to you by TTSH Nursing Organisation Development. I'm Kim.
And I'm Becky, and we're your hosts for this episode.
So over the past year, we've been getting a lot of requests, I think from nursing students and also very young nurses about tips to help them get through this transition. Currently at this point in time of filming, in January, we are actually having a lot of nursing students around also. So I think that this is a very timely topic for us to cover. Yeah, so let's just begin, I guess.
Okay, let's go! So as new nurses, you usually get an explosion of knowledge in your face and then you will have trouble remembering. Sometimes you'll start panicking and then your brain just gets all muddy, you cannot remember. So one of the ways you can do is that you get a small notebook, you jot down everything you have learned. So like, it can be like little things that they told you like, post-op monitoring is like how many hourly and how what's the frequency, and you keep inside your pocket, and it's just nice. It's like our nursing pocket size. You can find it smaller, bigger, whichever fits for you.
Yep.
Or sometimes if you are not a pencil and paper person, you can just use your phone and then use the notepad on the phone, and you can just jot down everything, and that's fine as well.
Yeah.
Or if you think, I don't have time to take out my phone, I don't have time to take out my notepad, what do? I have my lanyard with all my cue cards here. So usually I'll carry it with me with my name tag, but you know, today.
Wow,
Don't
but
need
that
it.
looks heavy.
Yeah, it does. So the thing is that usually you just keep the essential ones. For example, like usually I'll do like blood transfusion, monitoring, frequency, all the things that you know you definitely use, that I keep it here. Or phone number, so you know you don't have to rush to the PSA counter and like trying to find out what's the number for BTS, you know.
BTS?
Blood transfusion service. It's not the same BTS you're thinking about. Yeah.
Okay, yeah.
So all this, and then I think most important is usually like the deadlines for all your lines and all your cannulas.
After a while, it gets very confusing to remember. So like some products you have to change like in 3 days, some is 7 days, you know. So after a while, you're like, huh?
So I mean, if you find it really a hassle to take out your phone or your notebook, this is a great way to go. Yeah.
I think like something to add, right, is that if you, let's say you're using your phone, I think you just kind of need to be a little bit careful because sometimes it might not look as professional if like you're taking down notes or listening to people, right? Then you whip out your phone and like you're like typing stuff. So some patients or family members, like if they look at you, right, like it might not seem as professional because they don't know what you're doing. Then they think that you're just using your phone. So I think if let's say you're a phone kind of person, then you need to try to balance that. So I think which brings me to my point also. I perfectly segues to my point. For me, I'm not a tiny notebook kind of gal. I tried when I was a student, right? But I really, really cannot. I'm a very visual kind of person. And you know, for nursing, you have to learn and memorize so many different things. For Becky just now when what she showed, right? I think it's more of like protocols and things that you need to remember like, for the long term. For mine, right? For mine, I'm a clipboard kind of gal. It was a little bit awkward for me to bring this to work like as a student because like it's a little bit extra, not gonna lie. But for me, right, like it was really too small, especially if you're like maybe not so much protocol, but like to remember things about your patients. So I was like, okay, I need like a big piece of paper. And you know, some of like the older colleagues, right? I don't know how you guys do it. They just print out the patient details on one A4 paper. They will fold it into like this small, like crumple it and put it in, but they can just remember everything. You know, but I really, really cannot. Like it's just too small. So for me, right? Okay, I don't know whether you guys can see, right? So for me, right, I take this A4 piece of paper and how I split it is, okay, depends on how much space you want. And I'm thinking like settings like maybe ICU and all that where your patients are a lot more sick. Maybe you need more space, so you can just split it into half. But for me, I like to split it into 4s. So I color code like what I need to do also by importance. So everything that's in red are things like, okay, so on top here you have like, okay, these are all fake, okay, not real patient stuff, okay, I drew it up yesterday. So I'll write like my patient's name, the discipline or specialty that they're under. Then the red ones, right, are all like their lines, like IV cannula, if they're on like nasal feeding tube, all I write over here, fall alarm, anything important on the patient, like wound dressing, all that I will write here also. Then after that, of course, you write all your general patients things lah. So maybe like if the patient came in for a wound infection, I'll write here monitor skin or monitor wound infection. If you need to do certain charting, like for me, these are like important but not time sensitive things. So like example, like your conscious level charting, or maybe it's like certain routine things that you need to do during the shift, I will highlight it in green. Then for the things that are more important, like you need to collect certain specimens, for example, or the things like here, like your medication, then I will write them in red. Yeah. So I figured out this system for myself so that like it's easy for me to refer. At one glance, I can just look and be like, okay, these are all the things pending for my patient. So this has helped me lots. Yeah. So I think it just really depends on what you can work with and what you can figure out. Obviously, this is a bit of a hassle to like carry around the entire one. Some people really prefer notebooks and stuff, especially because you have to keep walking around. And there's a tendency for people doctors to take this and put their things and write stuff on it also. So make sure that you label your things properly also so that it doesn't get lost lah. Yeah.
The next tip would be don't be afraid to ask questions. I know as new students, you're afraid to ask questions because sometimes you may be worried that, some of the more senior staff nurses would be like, didn't they teach you this in school? Shouldn't you really know this? This is not your first time being in the clinicals.
Yep.
And they might deter you from actually asking these kind of questions. But I feel like now is the good time as new nurses in your 6 months of probation to actually ask this kind of question, because after this, you're a staff nurse, you're on your own. There might not be people helping you at that point of time. Then when you need to look for advice, there might not be anybody. So now, if you have any questions, just clarify. It's not a sign of weakness. It's a good learning point for you, and don't be afraid to ask.
Yeah. I always tell people that it's better to look stupid or sacrifice a moment of you coming across as a bit like dumb rather than risk your patient safety.
Correct.
Yeah. So now that you're still in this phase where there's someone supervising you at all times, there's always someone protecting and covering for you, right? To really just ask as much as you can. Okay. Again, perfectly segueing into my next point, which is not falling into the trap of comparison. Yeah, I think especially with your cohort or your batchmates, I think I've heard a lot from students, especially maybe you're in your final years of attachment, where there is that pressure that you have to perform better, right? Than like if you're a year 1, year 2 student, you're focusing more on like more basic skills. When you're later on in your nursing student life, when you're on attachment, there's a higher expectation of you. You are starting to take cases by yourself. You kind of have to function slowly as like a young staff nurse already. Or if you're on probation as well, like you've already graduated. In a few months' time, you're going to be independent by yourself. So although, of course, it is important for you to keep up to that certain standard and not fall behind, I think learning how to pace yourself and to set like achievable, but more importantly, more reasonable goals and expectations for yourself. So I've heard this phrase from like a nurse who is on her probation, right, that, at this week, right, like my other cohort mates, right, that joined, they're already taking this certain amount of cases, but for me, I'm only taking this amount of case. But actually, when you compare it like big picture wise, right, actually she still has a lot of time. She's not necessarily falling behind, maybe just a little bit slower. So if that's the case, I don't think you need to put that pressure on yourself, unless obviously your probation is about to end and you're only able to maybe take like 2 cases by yourself. Then of course that's another story. But if you're just falling behind a little bit and just need a bit more time, then just be patient with yourself, pace with your preceptor, whether this is okay and how do you like slowly improve day to day. I think that is something that's very important. Yeah. Another point also related to this is to plan consistent check-ins with your supervisor or your preceptor to check on your progress. And I think at the start, if you can, really sit each other down. This is what I did with my preceptees last time, is to really sit each other down at the start. And what I asked them was, how do you best learn? Then how will you describe yourself as a learner? Are you someone who learns really quickly? Are you someone who needs a lot of reminders? So that at least your preceptor knows how they can take care of you. Because every single preceptee is super duper different. Everyone's personalities are so different. I mean, even as a student, you will realize over the years, right, that your preceptors and their way of teaching is super duper different also. So for some people, it might be very hands-on, but for some people, they might have to look at the protocol and read. So if, let's say, my preceptee tells me that I learn best through reading and looking at stuff, then I'll be like, okay, so I know that I have to print out the protocol for you. Let's sit down after shift and go through everything. But if my preceptee tells me that I'm a much more hands-on kind of person, they'll be like, okay, if our ward doesn't have, I know I need to find opportunities outside to go and coach you, and we can do the skills together. Yeah, so pace yourself and try to plan all of this ahead before you actually even start your attachment. And during your attachment also, maybe just ask your preceptor like, okay, during this certain week, then maybe is it okay if after morning shift we stay back for a while to discuss and reflect?
I think asking it at the right time will be important. So
Yeah.
don't ask after maybe a night shift or like after a PM shift, and then next day your preceptor has a morning shift. I think everybody very tired. I think best time you usually can do this is like after your morning shift, then after the handover you got a bit of time. Then you can discuss your protocols and then like, oh, what do I need to improve on, feedback. I think this is like the best time to ask. Okay, then next we'll talk about how to learn to prioritize our tasks. So as a student, you sometimes be overwhelmed, like, oh, I have so many things to do. I need to take my para, I need to give my medicine, I need to drink my urine. So the thing is that you have only so much time in a shift, and you need to finish all your tasks. But sometimes you have to remember that nursing care is on and continuous. So the thing is that sometimes you really can't finish on your current shift, then you can hand over to the next shift. But you have to make sure that whatever you hand over are on the lowest priority, and you try to finish whatever that is needed. Like para, I need to do it now because it needs to be timely. So that if anything happens to my patient, I know what's going on. Medication, timely. So I think otherwise, the other things that's not as important would be maybe some paperwork.
Like wound dressing. You know, like it's not like I have to do it now. I can do it anytime today.
Yes, it's best if you could do it before you hand over to the shift, but if you don't have the time and you're really, really jammed out during your shift, then I think your next shift colleague will understand that, hey, you really don't have the time for it. So learn to prioritize, don't overstress yourself in it. Because if you try to like take on everything, you would never finish anything, and everything will be half done. You're running around like a headless chicken.
But definitely, of course, easier said than done. I remember, like just now I mentioned wound dressing, right? And I think that was an example from last time. So when I was a student, I was like, okay, all these are the tasks that I need to do for this specific patient today. But I wasn't really familiar with like the pattern of the ward rounds. So there were times where like I do the wound dressing, then the doctors will come. Open the wound dressing now, we want to take a look. Then I have to do the wound dressing again twice, so it really wastes my time, you know what I mean? I think once you kind of like observe more and are more familiar and in tune with like the patterns of the ward and like, what's that called? Like the day-to-day, like how, the routine in a sense, then from there you'll be able to shift your priorities and manage your time better.
Agreed.
Yeah. Okay, my next tip is that complete work-life balance may not be 100% achievable in the beginning, and that's okay. And I think I've re-emphasized this point quite a lot of times, even in the previous podcast, but to really give yourself that time and space to transition and build a strong foundation, I think a lot of Becky's tips so far are very focused on like clinical, which is very, very important. Really be ready to sometimes do overtime, to complete certain tasks, to document, and also be prepared to spend a little bit of time outside your clinical studying and revising, or kind of like reflecting through your day.
A lot of time.
A lot of time. I think I set this very unrealistic expectation on myself that when I was a new student, I was like, okay, I need to protect my rest time. So I really didn't want to OT. I always wanted to clock out on time. So because of that, I kept rushing because I was working towards that goal, that I wasn't taking care of myself in the process. So like example, I knew that, okay, I really wanted to go home on time, right? I wouldn't go for break. I was willing to sacrifice that, but it wasn't sustainable at all. And then like from there, my health got affected and all that, right? So just give yourself that time to figure out what works for you. And yeah, just be prepared to put in a little bit of time outside work. Like for me, my memory is sometimes quite short term. So if let's say, right, I hold it off and be like, okay, never mind, maybe only this weekend, then I will look through and reflect about my week. But then I kind of forget what happened during the day already. So sometimes maybe after shift, if let's say I'm morning shift, you might have to go home, or maybe you stay in the ward for a while, look through your case again, kind of reflect like, how could I have maybe planned my time a little bit better? Maybe this specific case, there was this condition that the patient has that I'm not very familiar with. Go home and then I search more about it. If you have like a drive or something where you like, I know some of my nursing friends, shout out to Benny, he's super hardcore about like all the theory stuff and studying and all that outside of his clinicals, right? So like every time I see his Insta stories, I'm like, this guy is crazy. He like loves the knowledge, I guess. So yeah, so really take that time to study, and then if you have a bank of knowledge or a drive or something, right, then like just store everything there so that you can go back to it and revise easier.
So Kim actually mentioned about breaks during your shift, and that leads on my other tip. So the thing is that you may not have work-life balance, but I think it's very important to take adequate amount of breaks during your shift. So you're allocated 1 hour of eating break time, and I think you might feel like, oh, I don't have time to complete all my tasks. I don't have time to eat. I don't even have time to finish my task. How can I eat? So, but I feel like it's very important that even if no matter how much time you don't have, you need to take that time to sit down, drink water, take your lunch or dinner,
Go to the toilet.
go to the toilet, relieve yourself. Your patient can pee, so can
Yeah.
you. You need to relieve your bladder too. So I feel that your break is very important and it lets you recharge. So sometimes during the shift, when you have so many things going on and you get more stressed out, then you're trying to finish all your tasks, then you make mistakes along the way, then you get very hard on yourself and you feel like, hey, I made so much mistake already, how can I still go for a break? I need to finish whatever I set up, done to do. So the thing is that you should still take your break, then in that way you can reset your whole train of thoughts, your whole emotions, and you can come in again, and then you can think better, you can do better. So I think break is absolutely most important. Don't skip.
Yeah, definitely. Recently, I went out with a friend, and then we went to the toilet, right? And then she was like, "Girl, you always pee super duper fast. Like, why do you always pee? You pee faster than like some of the guys that I know." Then I'm like, "Yeah, cause I'm a nurse." But okay, again, realistically speaking, if you're still a student or you have like a preceptor, right, when you're a new staff, sometimes you have to kind of follow your preceptor's routine and certain way of doing things, which might not necessarily be the most in line with how your body and brain will work. So you kind of have to be aware of that. For me, I remember one of my preceptors was very hardcore. Like, she's very fast. And like this specific time, that's her break time, you know what I mean? But for me, it's like, oh, but I kind of want to do my other tasks and all that first. So while you're still being supervised and while you're still under the control, not control, what's the word? Like the guidance of like a preceptor, right? I think be prepared that you might have to follow their routine a little bit more. But once you're a more independent staff and once you're done with your probation, right, then you will be able to set that timing and pacing for yourself. Yeah, like you would know, okay, this particular time slot, I can go for my break. Maybe I'll take a short 15-minute break or 5 minutes, just go there, go toilet, eat a little bit, and then come back out. Yeah, so just be prepared lah when you're still on probation. So my last one, and then we'll go to Becky's final tip. Come up with a routine to keep yourself sane. So I think this one is more outside of clinicals already. So I wrote like when to plan to meet your friends, when to exercise, which days to sleep in and rest, when to take your sleeping calming medication. I think that, yeah, like knowing when to do what for your body is really important. So like example for me, right, like nowadays when I'm on night shift, I try to make the most of my off day after my night shift. So some people will just go home and sleep, but for me, I will drink coffee at 5 a.m. Yeah, like on my night, like after I wake up from my nap, I'll drink coffee at 5 a.m. Then I'll go to the gym after my night, and then I'll stay up for a while, and then I'll try to just sleep for like 2-3 hours to not waste my off day. Yeah, but if you told me this like when I was a new nurse, right, I'll be like, girl, you are crazy, because after my night, I'm just gonna go home and sleep for the entire day. But I realized, right, that for me, like it takes away a lot of time from like my social life, and I really don't want to waste. So, because sometimes after your night shift, you only get 1 day off, and then the next day you're going back to work. So some people are perfectly fine, of course, with taking that off day to really rest, and sometimes I do that also when you're really, really tired. But yeah, to keep myself sane, the social life and socializing is really important lah. So I will maybe plan like for a dinner, so at least I can go home and rest before that, you know? Pace yourself. Pace yourself.
So the last tip will be, so you have all but these clinical tips, how to do well in your clinicals, and then also keeping yourself sane after work. And then these are also little things that you can do to keep yourself sane at work.
Yep.
So if you're a big foodie, I feel like a good way to keep yourself sane at work is to make little snacks for yourself and keep inside a locker. Because I know sometimes I advocate for taking your break, but sometimes it's just next to impossible.
Yeah.
And you're very hungry. And I feel like as nurses, even though we take care of our patient, we should take care of ourselves as well. I know a lot of nurses with like gastric issues because they don't take care of themselves and they don't snack, and then it just at the end of the day you just cascade down, and then you get tummy pain, and then you cannot think properly because you're so hungry. Yeah. So you can bring snacks, or you can buy like protein bars. You just keep inside your locker, or you just keep in your pocket, and then you're like, okay, I need a munch, and then you quickly go to your patient's pantry and just take a bite, and you take a sip of water, and you run back out. So I feel like, and there's also something to look forward to. Like you make your own snack, and you're like, oh my gosh, I can try it today. How would it work out for me? Would it like you can like test and trial your recipe? Like, oh, is this better for me? Like, can I take it one bite? Is it easy to swallow? Is it to chew? Like, is it portable? Like, I think this is like something fun and sane to keep you know, during your probation and when you're a new nurse as well.
One thing I like to do is, you know, when you go, like recently, I went to Japan. Earlier in the year, I went to Korea. Then, you know, they always have like those like gift, like, you know, those snack pouch, like not pouch, what's it called? Like this that big plastic bag with like a lot of different small snacks inside, like assortment of snacks. Then it's very easy to just like munch on and like tear and bite. So I like to buy them back from my colleagues. But you can buy those kind of things, right? And then like keep it in your locker. Like you know, especially if it's assorted snacks, right? Then it's like, oh my gosh, okay, like what am I gonna eat today? And then like it's like from a nice overseas country. Then when you eat it also like it brings you that nice memory of like, oh, when, like you know, like when I went on my trip, and then it, like you also kind of like look forward to your next trip, your next AL. It would kind of like remind you of that, that like, okay, I'm working hard now so that I can afford like my shiok AL like later this year, you know. So doing stuff like that and keeping all these kind of things in your locker. I know for certain people also they like to paste like nice pictures and all that in locker so that when you go back for your shop break, right, you open it, right, then you're like, okay, like this is the reason why I'm working so hard.
I have like a colleague who puts the photos of like a lot of photos of her niece. Then every time she opens the locker, she'll see all the cute photos of her niece.
So decorate that locker that you have. Keep a bunch of like nice snacks, and like some people like to put like those like nice scents and like smells inside. So every time you open, right, even though it's like super bad shift, right, then you open your locker, it's like
aromatherapy in your face.
Mindfulness. Okay. So all these things I think are really important to really help you during your clinicals.
This concludes our episode of Roll Call. You can listen to this episode on Spotify as well, of Nurses of TTSH, and then give our social media a like and a follow.
Yes, please. And if let's say you're a nurse, a more senior nurse with any tips yourself, feel free to comment on our video on Instagram or TikTok, or also leave a comment on YouTube as well. And we'll catch you on the next Roll Call. Bye!